Hi, my name is Wendi Miller, and I'm the CEO of Wings for Justice. Wings for Justice is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that protects children in the family court system. We create awareness, provide education, and advocate for positive change. 58,000 children in this country are taken away from a safe parent and given to an abusive parent every year. 1 out of 10 children experience domestic violence in this country, and 5 children die daily from child abuse. This is why Wings for Justice exists. Many people in this country don't understand or know what's really taking place in the family court system. But in our culture, when you have 1 in 10 children experiencing domestic violence and 5 children dying daily from child abuse, there's an issue with abuse and domestic violence in the country. And the family court system in the United States is continuing to perpetuate the abuse. Wings for Justice, when we formed with parents all over the country who had suffered through the family court system, where they've been in domestic violence relationships and their children had suffered abuse. I was one of those people that helped found Wings for Justice and had been through injustice and corruption in the family court system. My children and I suffered for 10 years in the family court system. Our case is still ongoing, and it's about 7 months from being over. What I want to share with you today about my story is that people all over this country, like myself, have gone through domestic violence and abuse. They're your next door neighbor, they're your coworker, they're the person down the street from you, they're the person you see in the grocery store that are going through domestic violence, and people don't usually see or know what that looks like. They want to label it that it looks like the person in poverty or the person that doesn't have any money or resources. But domestic violence is happening to everyone around you. When you have 1 in 10 children that are experiencing that, and your coworkers are going through it, your kids' classmates are going through it, people in your community and your neighborhood are going through it. Domestic violence is rampant in this country, and children are being abused and dying from child abuse. And so when my kids and I entered the system, we entered it like many people do, the family court system, trusting that it's going to protect you and your children. I suffered in a 13-year marriage through domestic violence. My children suffered abuse, and one of my children was sexually abused by her father. We fought all the way to the Supreme Court in our case, and I was fighting to protect my children. When my daughter was sexually molested by her father, we had forensic evidence documented by detectives, social workers, and caseworkers that was submitted to the court, and the judge refused to let the evidence in the courtroom. He refused to let anyone testify to it. And when the domestic violence was testified to, and the witnesses that testified to the domestic violence, all of that evidence was thrown out of court. And my children were ripped away from myself and given to their abusive father in 48 hours and moved across the country. This shouldn't happen to anyone. Children should never be taken away from a safe parent and given to an abusive parent. But it's happening to 58,000 of them in this country every day, like mine. And when a parent stands up to fight to protect their children in the family court system, they should have access to their due process rights and their constitutional rights, because that's what this country is based on. And when those things are denied in the family court system, which they were in my case, and they are in many cases that we work with, that we're denied access to protection, we're denied access to our rights to a fair and just trial. And when we went to court on my case and I fought to protect my daughter under the law, I was falsely imprisoned for 90 days. I was sent to jail to be silenced, because in my case, there was public corruption going on. There was a conflict of interest between my judge in Ottawa County, Michigan, and my ex-husband, who was the pastor of the church, and the judge was a part of the denomination. And the chief judge was a part of our church. Our case should have never even been heard in that county, but still to this day, 10 years later, that county and that judge are still holding on to this case. This is my story as an example of what's going on across the country. When I was in jail, I received 200 letters from parents and people all over the country that I didn't even know. They were writing me letters saying, please stand up, please don't give up, please keep fighting, we're praying for you and your children. And I knew that when I was in jail and I got out, we had to do something to bring change, positive change to the system in order to protect children. So I met with parents across the country, and a group of parents, we co-founded Wings for Justice. And when we did that, we knew that we wanted to create awareness all over the country to advocate for these children and these domestic violence survivors in the worst time of their life, in the deepest suffering that's going on with them. And then their children are suffering abuse, and the system is not protecting them. Over and over again, when parents are going into court and they're fighting to protect their kids, and their kids are being forced to go back to an abuser and spend time with them, whether it's full custody, partial custody, half joint custody, kids are being forced to go there and be abused over and over and over again. So what's happening in our country today is we are raising a generation of children who are suffering, long suffering of abuse and domestic violence. Years and years and years of ongoing abuse has dramatic and lasting effects on children as they become adults and how they function in society. Wings for Justice is coming alongside to help educate that this is happening in the system, that judges have no accountability, that there's no checks and balances, and they're playing God in the courtroom every single day and taking children's lives, and they're placing them in harm's way. There is a problem here, and we have to do something about it. Many of you ask this question, why is this happening? Why is this happening? Well, there's something called domestic violence by proxy, and when an abuser enters the family court system, they use the system to further perpetuate the abuse against their victims. When they can no longer go after their victim physically, they go after them through a substitute, which is the child. So the family court system then becomes the arena where the abuser is strategizing and continuing to perpetuate the abuse through the family court system, draining them financially through litigation, bringing them back to court through constant harassment, stalking, ongoing abuse to the child. So some of these cases can spend years in court and ongoing litigation. This is the picture of what's happening in our country through domestic violence by proxy, and another piece of this puzzle is something called Title IV funding. Why this is happening? Our federal government in 1974, under Walter Mondale, instituted the Child Abuse and Prevention Act. When they did that, Child Protective Services was formed across this country. And Child Protective Services was an agency that was formed to protect children from abuse. And now Child Protective Services is working alongside and within the family court system where this corruption is continuing and where children have not been kept safe in situations. And so under that act, what happens is every time a child is taken away from a safe parent and given to an abusive parent, or a safe parent and put in foster care, or a safe parent and given to a third party, every time that happens, that county receives $6,600 a month from the federal government, giving that county, the judge, the attorney, the caseworker, the custody investigator, the minors counsel, the guardian ad litem, any of those court officials that are involved in that case receive a piece of that pie. They receive a cut of that money every time a child is taken away. Now, in that clause under Title IV funding, it says that that child can be removed for the safety of the child to foster care, to a third party, or a family member, which could be another parent. So our federal government is funding children being taken away and placed in unsafe environments. And that those counties, every family court system in this country, is making money every time a child is taken away. This is fueling systemic abuse and domestic violence through the system and public corruption. This is what's going on in our family court system today. This is why domestic violence and child abuse is being perpetuated through the system, and we have to do something about it. This is why Wings for Justice exists. We come alongside to create awareness, to talk about Title IV funding, that this is happening in our system today, that domestic violence by proxy is happening in our family court system, and that children and domestic violence survivors are not being protected. So what are we going to do about it? How are we going to respond as an individual, as a human being in our culture today? How are we going to stand up for social justice? Because that's what this is. This is where human rights are being violated. due process rights, constitutional rights, and children are left to suffer at the hands of abusers. We are raising a generation through the family court system of abused children. This is going to have a huge effect on our culture for generations to come. But you and I can take a stand alongside Wings for Justice, and you can become an advocate with us. That can happen in multiple ways. You can create awareness in your community by standing up when you hear domestic violence, when you hear about child abuse, and reporting it. You can report it to the police, you can report it to Child Protective Services, but you need to report it. If you know what's going on, you need to say something. If you have a coworker, a friend, a neighbor that's talking about domestic violence, verbal abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, what's going on, financial abuse, spiritual abuse, all of these things are forms of abuse. These are forms of domestic violence. Domestic violence isn't just physical abuse. Domestic violence is verbal abuse and emotional abuse, which can be some of the most damaging. It's sexual abuse, it's financial abuse, it's spiritual and religious abuse. All these forms of abuse are happening in your community, in your neighborhood, in your county, in your state. And you and I have to do something about it. We have to stand up to help protect the voices that aren't being heard in the system. Children's voices are not being heard. They're being silenced and they're suffering. Domestic violence survivors are being silenced in the family court system. When 83% of women, mothers who are coming to court with documented sexual abuse to their child from their abuser, from their father, they're coming to court with documented sexual abuse. These judges are removing custody all over the country from those mothers and giving that abusive parent custody in this country. 83% of mothers that's happening to now. When they come with documented evidence of sexual abuse, they're losing custody of their children. So one way we can do this is by creating awareness, standing up. Don't put your head in the sand. Don't turn your back to a domestic violence survivor or victim that's going through it and a child that's suffering. Stand up for them. Walk alongside of them. Advocate for them. You can advocate with Wings for Justice. We have advocates all over the country that we train to walk alongside of our cases, that go to court with them, that support them, that help provide legal advocacy to them. We have attorneys and counselors in every community in this country. We're growing that network, and we need your help to do that so that we can give these domestic violence survivors and their children all the resources they need to heal and to fight legally in the system. So we welcome attorneys, we welcome therapists, welcome counselors, we welcome support organizations to partner with us in our effort to protect domestic violence survivors and their children in the family court system. So you can become an advocate by raising your voice. You can become an advocate by not turning your head and standing up and listening to someone that's crying out for help right next door to you, and say no more and help them stop the abuse. You can help us educate across the country by being a part of not only the conferences that we participate in, but educating through businesses in your community. You can bring in a Wings for Justice advocate to share about what we're doing in that community to provide advocacy and protection for domestic violence survivors and their children. We are doing an educational piece that's going to be sweeping this country, where we're working with law schools across the country to educate about domestic violence and abuse and how abusers use the system to further perpetuate the abuse. We're starting right here in Orange County, and we're going to be partnering with UCI Law School to do that. And we're going to be doing this with law schools all over the country to educate judges, attorneys, court officials, and everyone in the community about what is happening in the family court system and how abusers are using the system to perpetuate the abuse, domestic violence by proxy. So you can create awareness, you can help us provide education, and you can advocate. You can become an advocate and join our team, and you can also advocate financially. Our average case has 2 advocates on it. Every case has 2 advocates, and our average case is 5 hours we spend providing legal and emotional advocacy to that case. That costs about $500 to do so. That's 83% of our cases. 17% of our cases are about 30 hours or more. Those are the ongoing litigation cases where a domestic violence perpetrator is dragging the domestic violence survivor through the family court system, perpetuating the abuse to the child. Some of these cases can go on for years with the stalking and their harassment that continues through the system and the ongoing litigation to drain the survivor financially. So some of these cases, we will help that survivor represent themselves in court because they can't afford an attorney. So we help them do that. We help them prepare motions, go to court with them, help them gather their evidence, and do that so that they can function in court and navigate the system as well as advocate to protect their children. So we need your help financially. You can give and be an advocate for Wings for Justice by giving and donating to help us provide the advocacy in these cases that we need and they need so that they can protect their children in the family court system. Wings for Justice goal by 2020 is to help 500 cases in all 50 states, and our goal is to raise $1.5 million, and we need your help to do that. We need your help to advocate. We need your help to create awareness. We need your help to provide the education that's needed outside the system and within the system so that we can bring positive change to protect domestic violence survivors and their children. This is why we're creating this documentary. This is part of our educational piece and creating awareness across this country. You're going to hear stories of survivors and their children and how they suffered in the hands of the family court system and how the abuse was perpetuated through domestic violence by proxy, through the system, where some parents have lost their children like I did in the system and never got them back. Some who fought all the way up through the system, some who are continuing to fight in the system, and some children who've stood up and advocated for themselves with the support of Wings for Justice. So we want you to hear the big picture and listen to all the work that we're doing across the country, but we can't do it without you. It's going to take an army to bring change, positive change to this country to protect domestic violence survivors and their children, and we need your help. We welcome you to become an advocate. We welcome you to give and to donate and advocate that way to help us do the best advocacy we can in these cases and provide for what they need so that they can protect their children in family court system. We ask you to create awareness by not turning your head, not digging your head in the sand, and walking alongside those survivors and kids who are being abused in your community right next door to you, down the street, and in your workplace. And help us provide education in your community by inviting us in. Bring an advocate in, share the documentary, and we ask for your help. We ask for your help to join us so that we can protect children and domestic violence survivors in the family court system. Thank you so much, and we ask you to join our team. We're grateful for all the support you give us, and we welcome more. Thank you.